All right, hey guys, welcome to devlog number 2. As you can see, I've made some changes. We have a couple different towers. We've got an updated UI on the left here. Instead of just that buy a tower button, we now have access to multiple different towers, such as the shotgun tower, which is this one right here, the missile launcher, which is down at the bottom, the swivel tower, which is right here, and the mini missile launcher, which is right here. And let's just take a look at the first wave again. We'll just do just a mini missile launcher. We've also got several different types of enemies. So if I go ahead and pause before they get killed, and we're just going to zoom in, we have 3 different enemies on display right now. We have the Lurcher, which moves in short teleportation bursts. We have the Tank, and we have the Burster. So essentially, when this one dies, it runs that spawn critter script that we had before, and it will spawn 2 little ones in its place. Yeah, so let's just go ahead, take a look. So you can see Lurchers teleport forward independently. Tanks just have extra HP, and the bursters, I don't know if we'll see it, if we can even kill one. Yeah, there we go. So you saw the little things spawn. So let's go ahead, close that, and let's switch over to our level designer. We also have a level designer. So this works via you can put any grid size in. Let's do 7 by 13, spawn the grid. We also have the ability to move the camera around now. I haven't implemented that into the actual level, but it is here in the level designer. So we load all of our various terrain tiles. I'm going to make these intelligent at some point, but I just haven't yet. So you can, just paint terrain however you want. Get this one. So you just select what you want, and then you click what tiles you want to have do things. So you can have little islands or whatever. I just loaded some junk I had laying around for tiles, and then we can go ahead and put down tower bases on different tiles, and then we could do spawn beacons. So when we place down a path beacon, we are actually assigning it an ID, and then that determines the path the enemies will follow through the level. So there's 3 types of paths you can do: path A, B, and C. There's no difference between them right now. Well, it doesn't do a whole lot right now, basically because you can put down, because this is an A class spawner, I need to make it label itself as A, but basically all of these are A path beacons, which is this one right here. These are B and these are C. I should literally just add like a little letter to the center of this. But yeah, anyway, so all you do all that, enter the name of the map, let's call it devlog map. Enter whatever description you want, so just do that. And we'll hit save map. Then, if we go down here, go in Explorer, our devlog map, which we can see, yep, that's the correct string. And if we start at the top right, we'll notice, oh wait, no, hold up, that's stopped. And so it goes ahead, it labels all of the decorations properly throughout the entire file. See, we're getting like the middle pieces, etc. So that is essentially the level designer. Oh, and in case you screw up, you can click this button, move beacon to end of the list, and then, so currently our path is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So say I want to change this and make it so that enemies have to go, so currently they go like this and they snake their way through. So when you place one, it puts it at the end of the list. But if you've been placing them out of order and you're like, oh, I want this one to be the last one. So now it also zeroes them this time. So now it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he'll go here and then go to the base. So yeah, that is the level designer in a nutshell. And you can take this file, which we saved, and you can put it in to the maps file, and it will load this map into the game. Now, there's one thing I haven't done yet. The game doesn't actually care about it, but it's a thing I have to do, is the decorations. I don't have the tile system set up yet in the actual game. So you'll notice when I launch this, no tiles populate and there's no decorations. So I have to set that up still. But other than that, let's go on to our first subject. So our first subject is missiles. So you'll notice missiles literally move forward and then they rotate towards a given target and they basically track in on that target and kill them. So the way missiles do that is they are literally just the basic projectiles. I gave them a little particle system, but other than that, they are just the basic missile. But they have this, the missile script. So the missile script gives the ability for projectiles to track targets. So literally all it does, it's got a rotation speed. You pass it in a target via set target. And on update, if target's not null, we just rotate to face it, essentially. This is just some basic rotation math. Just nothing really to dig into here. If you want, I'll pause, read it, go for it. But yeah, it's not really anything spectacular. So we also have the ability for projectiles to actually kill enemies. I forgot I didn't implement that on day one. But yeah, so essentially we just we added to the health is projectile. So my mic is really poorly placed. So so if collision enemy, if the target is an enemy and we're a projectile, then we get the health component from the target and we inflict damage equal to our health and then we destroy ourselves. That's all there is to it. Then we have the shoot action, which literally just takes in, you give it what projectile it fires, you give it what projectile spawn points it has, the fire rate, fire timer, you give it access to the targeting ability, and then at the beginning, target component targeting. Then on update, we just implement fire timer by delta time, and then if it's greater than our fire rate, if target is not null, then we just check if the target's in range. If it is, we set the timer to 0 and we fire the projectile. Otherwise, we just set it to 0 and fire the projectile. So then the fire projectile literally just goes for each spawn point, instantiated projectile, teleport it to us, make it match the rotation of the projectile spawn point, and when I said teleport to us, I meant to the projectile spawn point, because those could be at the end of the barrel or whatever. And then if it has the missile component, then hand it the target. So that's all we do. That's the entire thing. Thrust, we already went over. I think I changed something from here. We did have the first hiccup of development last night, which is this right here. I spent 2.5 hours doing debug, being like, why won't missiles target things? And after 2.5 hours, I ate a piece of candy, I watched a YouTube video, and I came back and I just sat down. I was like, you son of a... Because this one reference was 0 references, meaning nothing was ever calling set target. How I missed that for 2.5 hours,
was that I was continuously rewriting this over and over and over again in like 50 different ways. Um, that and missiles, when they were coming out of the missile launchers, were coming out like sideways. So I had to make a adjustment. I had to A, implement this, and B, um, let's just pull a missile in. Give me a missile. Yeah, basic missile. So I had to make it so that, where'd it go? Did it just, yeah, it just despawned. Give me a missile again. There we go. So essentially, the issue was that missiles were by default, um, they were being spawned in like this. So they needed to be spawned in like this. So I just had to make that adjustment, which drove me absolutely nutty after 2.5 hours of trying to figure out what was going on, because they were spawning in sideways, and that was kind of the direction the enemies were coming from. I thought that they were targeting, but that the thrust script was just being completely ignored. Like, I thought that this transform to position transform up, I thought transform up was just not updating. Like, I thought it was just like, yeah, no, transform to up is locked. And I was like, that makes no sense though. So it was just 2.5 hours of just being extremely frustrated and not noticing that I never set the target on any missiles, because eventually I did just spawn a missile like manually, and then I just manually set the target, and it rotated fine. I was like, okay. But yeah, so sometimes when you're coding things, if nothing seems to make sense, take a break, go wander off for 5 minutes, watch YouTube, then come back, because it's probably something stupid if it's been more than 20 minutes. So, with that, we'll go on to the next section, which is going to be the. Well, I guess we'll cover the different turret types. One sec. All right, so we're just going to quickly go over how turrets work essentially. Because with our modular design, so all of our turrets have a tower rotation, or, well, not all of them, can have tower rotation, they have price, they can have targeting, they have to have a loading script, loading tag, they have to have an ID tag, sprite renderers, obviously just a sprite renderer, and they can have the shoot script. So with all of these abilities, we can see we have the missile tower, which does not rotate, which it still has the tower rotation script, it just rotation is 0. But making these is extremely easy with the way I've set it up. So the difference between the missile tower and the mini missile tower is pretty basic. So the main thing is the shoot script. So projectile for the missile tower is the basic missile, and we have one spawn point, which is the blue circle, which is this right here. So we're just using this as a reference for the spawn point. Then the mini missile tower, you'll notice we have just, a whole bunch of triangles and squares attached to it. So we're spawning mini missiles instead, so we're using a different ammo, which has its own settings. And then we are using 5 spawn points, the different varied red squares, and we're just setting that up and just changing the fire rate. So this fires every 2 seconds, fires a volley of 5, and the missile towers are just firing every half a second. So just by quickly customizing things, changing the number of spawn points, changing the fire rate, changing the information on the different ammunition types, like the basic bullets have 5 health, so they do 5 damage. The mini missiles, where is it? Have 3 health, so they do 3 damage. And the basic missiles are bigger, and they do 7, which that should also be 7. There we go. So You'll also notice movement speed differences. The big ones move at a speed of 7, little ones at a speed of 3, and the basic bullets have a speed of 4. So just by varying things, we can... This is nowhere near balanced at this point, but we can begin moving towards attempting to balance things. And that is essentially the entire tower design system at this point. You just add various scripts, you customize the parts of them, and that makes a new tower, and then you register it as a prefab, and then registering it as a prefab will eventually, not yet, allow you to automatically create a button in this UI for actually spawning that tower in. Currently, I've just hard-coded these. Each of these does a individual, except for this. This should be at the bottom of the list. Go down. These 4 are all just hard-coded. All they do is game controller, tower controller, .by tower, and then they punch in the loading tag of the tower. That's all they do. Missile tower, swivel, and mini missile. So let's move on to the level designer now. So our level designer is made up of a canvas and an event system. The event system has a ton of different scripts, each of which we're going to go over. Not right now, but after we go over the general overview. It has the grid panel data handler, the panel manager, the tile painter, the tile grid, the save to XML script, and the base input script. Yeah, and the base input script. Then we have our different panels. And then we have our main UI panel, which is this top one up here, which has 4 buttons, 4 buttons. The first of which is the terrain paint button, which goes to the event system, panel manager.swap to X to panel X. And it just swaps between these panels. And so let's just bring that script up, I guess. So it just brings up this script, which literally all it does is it's just got an array of the panels. On start, I hard-coded it to go to panel 2 because that's the one I want it to go to. And all it does is it has a thing that hides all the panels, so it goes through for each panel in the array, get component panel control dot hide. So it just tells that panel, hey, I want you to hide. All that does is make the game object inactive. So just set active, false, and show is just set active, true. The next thing we have is our 2 panels. So we'll do panels 0 and 1. So these ones have 2 scripts, the panel control script and the object button manager script. So the panel control script we already went over, just hide and show. And the other one, which is the object button manager, is one of the fairly large scripts. So it's got a ton of things. It needs access to the tile painter. It's got a dictionary of buttons. It has a button template, which we feed it in, which is, of course, over here. It's an object button. Then we have our width count, spacing, and offsets. The next ID it'll assign, and the next X and Y it'll assign. And they increment by 1. So they go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll get to the math. So at start, we go get a copy of the tile painter. We set TP as a reference to it. We then create our array of buttons, or our dictionary of buttons, and then we do the spawn buttons action. And spawn buttons sets next X and Y to 0. And if we're in object mode, so we have 2 modes. We have object mode and decoration mode, essentially. So object mode is for this, and decoration mode is for this. So the first one, object mode, for each in the resource library.map components. So the resource library is much like the map library in the wave library, and I think level loader does the same kind of thing that resource library does. So resource library is just kind of the level designer equivalent of the level loader. So it goes through and it finds the map components folder, and it takes all of these and it puts them into a dictionary. And then for each thing that is a map component in that dictionary, we create a game object via the spawn button ability, which instantiates a version of the template. We then define some stuff in it. So we're going to have to go to that class. We then define the object button manager and its ID. So we just hand it a reference to ourselves. And we hand it a ID, which, you know, standard ID tag stuff. We then get our ID tag, assign the number, and we get the button that is part of this because we're using the Unity UI buttons, and we just add a on-click listener for clicked, which is literally just we go back to our OBM, so our object button manager, and we report that we were clicked, and we give it our ID. So that's all we do there. We then set the new button to be a child of the object OBM is set to. We then move it to the appropriate spacing via some math. So we just do new vector 3. So it's the W offset, which we set up here. So just the W offset plus the spacing times how many X's we've done for the X coordinate. So that's how far left and right it is. Then we do the H offset, so how high up on this panel it is. We just do the H offset minus the H spacing times next.y. So that just creates our nice orderly rows. And then we want a Z of 0, obviously. And we add it to our dictionary of buttons. And then this just handles, you know, having however many we want per row. That way, if we're at the end of the row, go to the next column kind of deal. So then we have fill buttons with objects, which you'll notice all of these have a little depiction of the object that they spawn. So that's tower base. These are path beacons. These are spawn beacons. This is an empty, actually, and this is a base. So what we do is we just tell that button to spawn a dummy child of that object. And what the spawn dummy child does is just as child equals to spawn, and then we take sprite template object, which is a sub object of the button that we spawned, and we get its component, the Unity UI image, we get its sprite, and we just set it to the object to spawn that we handed in sprite. So if we hand it a tower base, we get the tower base's sprite, or what would be used if it was spawned, and we just render it on top. And that is everything we do for this panel. This panel, we do things a little tiny bit differently, but not very much. Essentially, instead of handing it a object and having it get that object and then get its sprite and assign it to here, we literally just hand it a sprite. We just spawn sprite, and that's it. We just handed a sprite directly. We're just like, okay, yep, sprite, take the sprite. Then the last panel we have is this one, which is just a little bit of a control panel. So the scripts we use are the tile grid scrid and the grid panel data handler scrid. Grid. So we have width and height, which are game objects, which if we go to, I believe it's the event system. Yep. Grid data handler, width and height are input fields. So that's just this object and this object. We just huck them in there. We attach this button to basically trigger this. So what happens is we just get the grid width from here. We get the grid height from here. We make our next tile 0. And then we delete the current grid. So if tiles does not equal null for each tile, basically go kill it. And then we make a new dictionary of tiles. Then after that's done, we go for int x equals the negative grid width minus 1 divided by 2. So if we have 5, we want to create 5 tiles this way. If we have 5, we want to take 5 tiles this way. So what we're doing, because we're starting at a negative, because we want to start at minus 2. So we're making a negative, and we're taking the grid width, which is 5. We're subtracting 1, so we get 4, and then we're dividing it by 2. So we get 1. So we get negative 2, negative 1, 0, because we're going up by 1 each time, and then we get 1, 2. So that creates 5 by 5. Instead of having it start at 0 and go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I want it to make it go into the negatives as well. And it does the exact same thing for y. So we're now working in an x, y double for loop. Each time we do this, we instantiate a instance of the tile template. We transform its position to the x and y that we want it. Then we add to the tile dictionary, and then we just hand a copy of the tile grid to it, set its ID, and increment ID by 1. That's it. So that's the entirety of generating a grid. So that is basically it for that. So the next button is the move beacon to end of list button. So what that does is in the tile painter, it makes in assign mode true via this script right here, activate spawn beacon mode. So it just, since we have a reference to the tile painter, we just set the assign mode to true, which means that when a tile reports it's clicked, beacon tiles dot remove the ID that reported the click. We then get the count of tiles, and for each, we go through this array equal times to the number of things that are currently in the beacon as it was. We get the first game object in the list. We remove it from the list. We put it back, and then we just add it back to the list. And then we add the one that we're moving to the end, and we assign its path beacon ID, and then we remove assign mode. So we're just turning it off. So the next thing to cover is save to XML, which is this thing, which actually isn't that bad. So essentially what we do is we just get ourselves a reference to the tile grid. We create a list of strings called the file contents. We take in this name, we take in this description, we assign a file, so assets streaming assets XML, which isn't compiled, for us to write to. And then we go tg get component tile grid, so because we got to assign a reference of tile grid to tg, that way we can actually use it. We actually don't use an update method, so we're just going to delete that. And when somebody clicks this button, it activates activate save, which runs save map to XML. So what that does is it creates a new list for file contents. It adds the name and .xml. It appends it to the end of file to write. File contents.add. We add a line just called maps because let's see, because we've got to match this. So we just add maps index the name followed by what the player entered as the name. Then we add description, what the player added as a description, and then we create a object called the base object. And then for each dictionary entry, we grab a copy of the entry and we name it G. So for each key value pair, first we check because the main thing that we're dealing with is the load IDs. We check if it's a base. If so, we're going to store it in the base object because we want to add that at the very end, just because otherwise it can cause some weirdness. So we just store that away. And if it's a path beacon, we just skip it because we deal specifically with path beacons. Otherwise, if it's not a base and it's not a path beacon, we just write tile, and we get the X and the Y. Huh. That's an error. This should be a Y. We get the X and the Y. So we're writing tile XY, then we get the terrain type, and then we write that out. So whatever the load ID is, we do decoration and we get the sprite name and we write that in. So then at the end, we have our beacon tiles. So we're just going to go ahead, we add the tile, we add, this again needs to be fixed. So we just add to the file contents basically the location of the beacon. We write that it's a beacon. In particular, we get the child load ID, obviously, because we have 3 different spawn beacons, A, B, and C. And then we get the decoration, we add that in. And then at the end, we just add the base in. So whatever our base object is, we just punch that in. We just end the file and we write to the file, which is literally just open a stream writer, and for each string in file contents, just write it out and then close. And that's the entirety of save to XML. Oh, and then something I didn't cover, this button right here literally just hides all panels. Yeah, yep. It just doesn't run the open a panel, it just hides them all. So, what we're adding on Tuesday is the wave editor, the smart tile decorations, wave scaling, decoration loading in level so that we can actually see our decorations in the background, tower upgrades, and tower evolution possibly. That way you basically, I don't know if that's going to be a thing though. We're gonna test that. We're gonna see what we can do about it. Basically, it means that you build like the basic tower and then you upgrade it to the different types. And we'll have like branching evolution paths, who knows. But I'll take a look at that. I'll see if that's something I enjoy working with, or if it just gets frustrating and I'd rather just have the, okay, well, I just want a mini missile tower and just plop it down kind of deal. But yeah, so those 6 goals are Tuesday's goals. I hope you guys are enjoying following along on the dev blog, or vlog, I guess, dev vlog. And I hope that we can get some more people in Discord. I want to hear community feedback on like what kind of features you guys like to see, especially as we get later in development. Like, we're already kind of hitting the point where I'm just like, do I want to do this or that? Especially with like tower evolution. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. But yeah, let me know in the comments. Join us in the Discord. Leave a like if you enjoy this kind of content. And just leave feedback on the game and what you think. And have a wonderful day. Bye.